Well, allow me to say that I feel deeply honored and I feel happy to have the opportunity to interact with young people like you. And I admire your courage. I mean, the decision to sit for the competitive examination, which is about the toughest in this world. What you need is determination plus some skills. The purpose of this workshop is really to give you some skills to answer the questions, which will be taken up a little later. Uh, well, first of all, I'd like to say that the first three papers of the general studies appeared to me. I appeared for the exams over half a century ago when the ball game was quite different. The purpose is to test your potential to be a generalist, because there is a philosophy founded in British constitutionalism and governance that those who have a wider education, broader education, are better suited to deal with matters of public policy, matters of public interest, and governance in general than those whose line of education was absolutely specialized. That's a time-honored concept on which the civil service has been created and built and structured. Okay. Having said this, could I ask you to define civil service? Any of you? Okay. How many of you possess Oxford Dictionary in paper form, not in electronic form? Any of you? You, good. I'm so happy. The civil service has a definite meaning. When I ask aspirants, sometimes in mock interviews, why do you wish to join civil service? I get a standard reply. Sir, I'd like to pay my debt to the society, which had given so much to me. I'd like to serve the poor and the downtrodden. Honest thoughts, but it's neither here nor there. Civil service, according to Oxford Dictionary, which I suggest all of you should buy, it's not costly, is, let me quote, non-military and non-judicial wings of the government. That is, all posts which are borne on the civil side of the budget are what we call the constituents of the civil service. Is that clear? Okay. By this definition, a peon is a civil servant as much as the cabinet secretary. Okay. But a judge is not a civil servant. A soldier is not a civil servant. Right? Second point is that civil servants are therefore primarily what you call the main element of the operative part of the government. The operative part of the government. Okay? Which means, contrary to what you might think, civil service is mainly, primarily, a law enforcement agency. A district magistrate is responsible for enforcing Code of Criminal Procedure, Arms Act, and all the legislations in which his powers are codified, okay, conferred on him in his personal capacity, exercisable by him in his own judgment, by application of his mind. So, mind is very important here. Please note this particular point. Therefore, this subject of ethics could be better described, I suppose, as ethics and mental philosophy. Ethics and mental philosophy designed to create a mindset, which we might call the administrative mind. Now, the word mind is very important here. Can you hear me? Okay. See, something wrong, I suppose. इसको ठीक कर दीजिए. ठीक है? Is it okay? I think I should raise it here. Right. You see, civil service is an institution. Right? An institution has a body and it has a soul. This is very important. Civil service exists everywhere. Now, if you look back to the definition I gave, it is state character neutral, meaning Saudi Arabia can have a civil service. Myanmar has a civil service. India has one, Pakistan has one. But the character of the civil service, its value systems are totally different. So, the dictionary definition of civil service is state character neutral. But in the Indian context, I repeat, in the Indian context, the civil service as an institution has a soul based on the character of the Indian state, which is often described as a modern representative state. A modern state built on the principles of representative government. You know the famous book by John Stuart Mill, Representative Government. Now, these are loaded expressions. The normal books that you get here and there don't adequately explain the essence of that. So let me just try to explain you briefly the soul of the Indian state, which determines the character of the civil service of India. India is a modern democratic state founded on the principles of representative government, and therefore it has a special characteristic. Right? To illustrate this point, in Pakistan, army has a role in some matters connected with the local administration. The same is true of Myanmar. But India, it is not so. What exactly is the spirit, the body and the soul of the civil service of India? This, I think, requires some going back to history. Okay? Now, I may not sound particularly Swadeshi, but let me state what I might call an official perception, rather an Eastern perception of how the state of India emerged. Because I had served in Eastern India, mostly, in Assam, northeast part of India. You see, the idea of a modern state founded on the principles of representative government is essentially a consequence of the European intervention in the affairs of India. Go back to 1687, the city of Madras, around Fort St. George, under a charter of King James II on the 30th of December 1687, a municipal corporation was constituted, the second oldest in the world, just after London. Why it is important is because this corporation of Chennai, of Madras, this corporation had Nagar Palikas, as you call them, aldermen, and some of them were Indians, and they were appointed primarily because they paid taxes to the municipal authority for maintenance of civic services. Earlier, this was the responsibility of the governor of Madras. This body was the first body in Asia in which the basic concept that those who pay taxes have the rights to decide how the tax proceeds are utilized. Now, the tax proceeds constitute what you call public money. This idea of public money, that public money should be spent to promote public interest, is the first step towards democracy. Now, this was the idea not prevalent in India at any point of history. So this was a remarkably modern idea that was first introduced in India. In 1789, after the French Revolution, Pondicherry, again in South, had its elected government for the first time. And a similar body was formed in Chandanagar near Calcutta. Thereafter, what happened is a long story, I did not go into it. But the short point is that when East India Company acquired the Diwani of Bengal after Battle of Buxar in 1765, they had a problem. They initially tried to run the administration, that is collection of revenue, and get their share percentage as decided at the city of Allahabad under terms of what came to be known as the Treaty of Allahabad. Within 10 years, they found that the arrangements were totally unsatisfactory. At that point of time, there were 26 districts, out of which 22 were headed by Iranian officials, mostly Iranians. And then the East India Company had its own cadre of business executives. They are variously designated as writers, factors, agents, chief agents, etc. The writers' building is where Bengal Secretariat is located at Dalhousie Square in Calcutta. It was the place where civil service in India began. The Fort William College for training of civil servants really was functioning from that building. So in 1772, Warren Hastings took a revolutionary decision. He drove away the old mansabdars or whatever, the revenue collectors, and appointed his own business executives, whose jobs were primarily to maintain trading establishments, sent them to the districts to serve as district magistrates and collectors. So Warren Hastings is the founder of the institution of the district magistrate and collectors. Later, Lord Cornwallis applied the principles of separation of powers and created the institution of the district judges and superintendents of police for investigation into crimes. Lord William Bentinck in 1835 found that the Indians were by and large excluded from this administrative process, who created the provincial cadres of the civil service. Okay? And above all, Lord Macaulay introduced English education, codified the laws, and gave us for the first time what you call a unified criminal code. That is the Indian Penal Code. We are still struggling with the unified civil code, but it was Lord Macaulay. And he took steps to define the law of evidence, the Indian Evidence Act, a fantastic piece of legislation. So what I'm trying to say is that over the years, this system, by and large, which was introduced in Bengal, later in United Provinces, was replicated in other parts of the country with some modifications, which became what you call the civil service of a country, right? Come down to the present structure. It was in 1919, under the Government of India Act, that what you call central services, the Group A services, were clearly established. They were placed under direct control of the Government of India. So what really you are trying to do is to get into the elite civil service of this country, elite civil service of the central government. Now this distinction must be borne in mind, that you have the state services and you have the central services. Now what exactly is the precise role of these cadres? You must have read, but there is one aspect that is best defined in a report of the OECD, Organization of European Cooperation and Development. You are aware of this definition? Huh? Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that this is a cadre where people are recruited at the early stage. They are trained to hold highest positions in the department. And they are to participate in not only implementing, administering the laws, but also in making of policies, in making of laws, in controlling expenditure, and of course, in formulation of budget. So this particular aspect is very important. In Singapore, it is clearly stated that this is what you call the elite civil service. Now, the value systems of the elite civil service is what we are going to discuss now. And see, there is a method in madness. The ethics paper deals with lots of things, like Greek philosophy, we have Indian philosophy, we have moral thinkers. But what exactly is the purpose? What exactly is the purpose of telling you all that? Because there is a purpose. The purpose is to instill your faith in state as an institution. Aristotle considered state as the highest organization of mankind. Now, there is a basic difference in our approach to ethics and the Greek and European approach to ethics. Ethics is not a part of theology in Greek system. Ethics is a part of politics. See, it is practical ethics, meaning the value systems that should be followed by people who exercise power over others. Now, the main difference between civil service and other wings of the government is that civil servants exercise power over other citizens. Okay? Make no mistake on this. When you, as an income tax officer, serve a notice on a person, why he should not be asked to file a return, you are exercising your power over him. Okay. Now, the exercise of power over other human beings requires a certain character. It requires a certain ability. It requires a certain value systems. And the primary basis of this value system is founded on the ideas of law and the ideas of justice. What's the relationship between law and justice? What's the relationship between law and ethics? Could any of you make a point? Okay. Who codifies law and what basis? Okay, fine. Now, one point. India is a common law country, quote and unquote. Common law, COMMON. India is a common law, quote and unquote country. I refer to Fali S. Nariman. You know about him? Fali S. Nariman. His book, Fali S. Nariman, Distinguished Jurist. You know about him? No. Okay. Fali S. Nariman, you know about him. He has written a fascinating small book I suggest to read. India's legal system, can it survive? It's a paperback. So, here Mr. Nariman defined what is common law. Common law means a country like India which follows the principles of British laws, jurisprudence, procedures, and practices. And one of the main features of a common law country like India is that what you call judge-made laws. Laws are not made only by legislature. Most laws in India are made by the judges of the Honorable Supreme Court. Take the collegium system of appointment of judges. There was no law. It was made by the judges themselves over the years by passing certain orders. The orders become law. Suppose a court passes an order in a case. Other judge dealing with a similar case may quote that precedent, and this is how it becomes law. This is extremely important for you to understand that in India, judge-made laws are as important as laws made by the legislation. But if you go through any law, you can just click and go through some of the bills which have been just introduced, you will find that in every bill, there is a chapter on objects and reasons. Now, these objects are always ethical. There is an ethical component in these objects of law. Okay? There may be an administrative need, but every law has an ethical basis. That's extremely important for you to appreciate. This is the relationship between law and ethics. Okay? Laws are made in the public interest to meet a public need, a public demand, a particular situation. Therefore, the relationship between ethics and law is extremely close. You cannot isolate the one from the other, right? Law is based on justice. What is justice? Now, this definition of justice is very important. And a lot has been written on the subject. But let me just come back and say that justice is well defined in the law itself, in its objects and reasons, how it should do it. But the idea of justice is based on public good, public interest. I give an example. Under Motor Vehicles Act, if you want a license, you have to pass a test. Okay, now it is within the power of the transport officer to give you the license. Now, what are the elements of justice and ethics and morality or public interest involved in this particular action? Let me just illustrate, because this will help you to answer your questions. First, public interest part is that those who know how to drive well should drive a car for road safety. This is one. This is the public interest part. Justice is that only those who pass the fitness examination or test should get the license. So the person who is exercising his power must bear in mind that this is the definition of justice as far as issuance of this license is concerned. Okay. Third point is very important, is that apart from safety and all, you should also look at the congestion part. You cannot indiscriminately issue licenses to so many people. There has to be a rigorous periodic test of your physical and mental state of affairs. So in every action that a civil servant takes, an official takes, he exercises his power over other citizens. The element of discretion is therefore has to be just. How? A person fails to pass the test, and you record, I have examined, I found that he is unable to drive to dissatisfaction of the requirements, and therefore I deny him, I reject the application. This is what you call an act of justice. You have taken a decision which is just, fair and proper. Fair to the person concerned also. Now, if somebody gives you a telephone call and says, देखो ये बच्चा है, सीख जाएगा, अभी थोड़ा सा गलती है, लेकिन वो give him a chance to drive, he will pick up. If you accede to this request, you are transferring your responsibility. You are evading your responsibility and acting at the behest of another person. Whatever may be the incentives or reasons, whatever it is, but you are not doing justice to yourself. You are not being fair to the cause of public interest. So this is what you call practical ethics. Now, coming to this, the idea of fairness is that whatever orders are written, whatever orders are given, it must be clear and specific. You must give reasons for your decision. Therefore, as good old Aristotle said, reason is the foundation of ethics. Whatever orders you give must be based on some reasons. And the reasons should be recorded in writing. And it should be not only just and fair, but should appear to be just and fair to the general public. Now, this appearance is most important because people would come to know about it. Everything will be known. How come in Delhi, almost 60% of those who are having driving licenses would not have passed the tests? Which means two things. Public interest is affected. Justice is denied because it was partial. Some people got it, some people didn't get it. Third, most damaging part, wrongful use of discretionary powers, which means an act of fear or act of favor or act of whatever. So this is what you call, in some summary, misgovernance. Right? So, what then is the precise role of civil service in a country? One thing must understand that the philosophy of examination-based recruitment is not something very new. You see, Chinese civilization introduced this over thousands of years ago. Over 2,200 years ago, the Chinese introduced the system of competitive examination for recruitment of the mandarins, as they're called. In India, it came much later. The East India Company, up to 1853, used to recruit more or less on patronage basis. The writers and the East India Company executives. The Indian civil service therefore emerged from out of this. In 1854, the system of competitive examination was introduced for recruitment to Indian civil service. This was the contribution of Lord Macaulay. Now, you may ask me why. It gives a certain amount of legitimacy. This is very important. When people are recruited on the basis of an examination, it acquires a certain amount of legitimacy. The people know that these are the people who are competent to administer. Quoting good old Aristotle, those who are competent and endowed with reason and philosophy, they only are fit to rule. So it gives you a certain amount of legitimacy. But with legitimacy, there is also something else, that is the concept of public trust. This is very important. There is a feeling, if you go by the media, that by and large, the public trust is enjoyed by the political executive, the legislators. ठीक है? Is it clear? No. ये थोड़ा लगा दीजिए ठीक से. ठीक है? No. I'll continue? Okay. Why don't you come forward? You see, this legitimacy part is often, I should say, discounted by the press and the media. In the sense that you have a trust. You have the trust of the public. They expect you to exercise powers in your own rights. Now this is important. When a power is conferred on you under a certain statute, it is exercisable by you and you only. By your own judgment, by your own understanding, by your own evaluation. And therefore, there is an element of trust in it. So, betrayal of this trust is an unethical conduct. So when you get a question where an MLA spoke to you about this or that and you do it, if you go strictly by whatever has been suggested, without applying your mind to the matter, you are betraying the trust reposed in you by the people. So, like the legislators, the officials who exercise power in their own rights. This is a point I would always emphasize, that if power is exercised by a person in his own right, he cannot subcontract it or pass it on to somebody else. That would be not only illegal, improper, and it is unethical also. Okay? So that essentially sums up the concept of practical ethics. What exactly is the importance of civil service in a state? It's very important. Let me quote Subhash Chandra Bose in his address at the Haripura Congress in 1938. He said, "In every country, ministers come and go, but the steel frame of the permanent services remains. It is the permanent services who really rule in every country." Unquote. Subhash Chandra Bose, as you know, obtained 4th rank in the Indian civil service. And this is what he said about the role of the civil service. He has also defined in his famous book, The Indian Struggle, foreign rule. Rather, he gave an administrative definition of foreign rule. Foreign rule, according to him, is a rule under which all top administrative posts are reserved for the rulers. Though Indian civil service was created and Indians started entering into it from 1863, the Indian members of the Indian civil service till 1947 were not allowed entry into what is called the strategic decision-making apparatus of the government of India. They are excluded. Okay? Now, therefore, civil service is the most important part of what you call governance in a broad sense. And this role is substantive, important, and it is underscored in the Constitution. Whatever protection that has been given to civil servants under the law, in their service conditions or whatever, is essentially to enable them to perform these duties, right? Now, let's go back to the part A of the ethics paper. I consider a few aspects of Greek philosophy extremely important. Stoic. You know about Stoic philosophy? A Stoic is a person who is indifferent, is detached from the environment, and this is because he wants to retain his objectivity. Let Mr. Naresh Chandra, who passed away on 9th July, was the embodiment of Stoic philosophy. Even in the height of crisis, he was unruffled. Some kind of emotional indifference to certain matters which might come up before you for a decision. Why Stoic philosophy is important for a civil servant is because if you get excited and become emotionally involved in the problem, you become a part of the problem. You can't solve it. Okay? So, a certain amount of detachment, unemotional approach to matters is absolutely essential. So, Stoic philosophy is relevant for this purpose. Okay. Second, sophistry. When you say in English it is sophistry, which means you are trying to articulate something in a pretty complex manner. But a sophist is an agent of change. He's a teacher. A scientist is a sophist who tries to transfer technology to the farmers, for example. So a bit of sophistry is essential for a civil servant. In other words, a wide interest, a wide range of interest in other cultures, which we Indians sadly lack by and large. Interest in learning other languages, other societies. That is what is called a high quality of civil servants. You know about Alan Octavian Hume? Hume Congress? But he is the first ornithologist of India. When he was collector at Etowah, he observed the birds and left behind a classic, The Birds of India. Grierson was a Bengal civilian. He left behind 14 volumes of Languages of India. It's still the only textbook that you always refer to whenever you deal with the Bodo problem or any other problem in this country. Next quality is cynicism. A cynic is a person, normally in India we think that a cynic is a person who is pessimistic. No, a cynic is a person who, it takes a practical, a little negative to start with, but it is the sign of an argumentative Indian, an argumentative spirit. Mrs. Gandhi announced Garibi Hatao. Now a cynic civil servant would say, yes, I take note of this program, but cynic in me tells me that Garibi Hatao is not likely to take place soon. It is not something that can be hut out quickly. This is cynicism. Second is skepticism. A skeptic is a man who doesn't accept anything at his face value. That's a very important point. And when you get a question, when you discuss the questions next time, I would like to see how many of you are really skeptics. A skeptic is a person who is practical, who doesn't accept anything, anything at face value. And next, you see, he should not have any faith in Epicurean philosophy, because that is a road to destruction. It is going to finish you morally and intellectually. So like this, if you sum up, what should be character? Vivekananda defined character in a brilliant manner. Character is what you do, what you think, what you dream, all put together. It is the sum total of your consciousness. And what is consciousness? He mentioned about divinity in man. The purpose of education is to rekindle the divinity in man. So in other words, justice is the cornerstone. And understanding of the idea of justice is really what part A is all about, and the practical aspect of applying this concept of justice. Now, John Rawls talked about fairness. Fairness is very important in the sense that you have several alternatives. You have to choose the alternative that is rational and that is wise and fair. Now, this choice, making a choice, is a mental process. Don't you agree? When you have several options, you have to make a mental choice. While making this choice, you have to be guided by these principles of ethics and philosophy, and then come to a reasoned conclusion. This is what Kant called categorical imperative. The will to be fair, the will to be just, is basically the outcome of a mental process. This process has to be positive and at the same time geared to study the details of the case. Now that is most important. If you look at Gandhiji's philosophy, Ambedkar's, M.N. Roy's, you find there is one strain, that is welfare of the masses, that is maximization of welfare of the people, and minimization of injustice. Now, injustice is, again, like justice, can be very broadly defined. And one has to be careful in deciding a case based on your concept of justice. Is there any injustice likely to result from this particular course of action? These are the questions which must arise, and this is what you call skepticism. So, strengthened with all these values, you might as well embark on this venture. I will not tell you that when you read Falius Nariman's book, you will note he refers to Article 372 of the Constitution. Okay? Have you read? Any of you seen this particular article of the Indian Constitution? You see, under Article 372 of the Constitution, all laws rules, regulations, which were passed before 1947, were taken over to our statute book. This included, as I explained to you, the common law system of jurisprudence and administration. Fine? And therefore, together, these principles constitute what is called the administrative mind. The whole purpose of Part A is to create in you an administrative mind. Now, what is the difference between administrative mind and the judicial mind? Is an important matter, because when you deal with a case, the examiner would like to see whether you have developed a mature administrative mind. Administrative mind is geared to deliver what is called administrative justice. Administrative justice is what a civil servant is always concerned with, like Motor Vehicles Act. Take the case of Indian Arms Act, where a district magistrate has the power to issue gun license. Now, there are certain conditions which have to be fulfilled. Okay? These conditions, if they're not fulfilled, the applicant is not entitled to it. So here is an instance of delivery of administrative justice. The difference between judicial mind and administrative mind is this: that the judicial mind is conditioned by the process. There is a system of hearing the evidence, looking at both sides, and then you come to a decision. Okay? Now, in case of a person who is applying his administrative mind, it is the same. But the definition of justice is more practical and more broad. And that is what makes the task of an executive officer, a civil service officer, much more complex. Because you don't have the benefit of going through a judicial process. You don't always have the benefits of the lawyers arguing the particular case. You have to position yourself as the advocate of the poor, advocate of the devil also. You have to be the advocate on both sides. You have to mentally imagine what could have been the point of view of this person, even though his case is not adequately explained before you. So these are the faculties which constitute what you call the administrative mind of a bureaucrat, of an official. And to what extent this mind has been developed is extremely important. I narrate to you a personal experience of mine to differentiate between administrative mind and the judicial mind. You see, I was posted in Kamrup district in Assam, and the divisional commissioner, a formidable officer of the IS of 1952 batch, is no more, was known for his tough decisions and strict inspections. So he asked me to meet him in the afternoon at his office. When I went there, soon after I found a large body of men led by a formidable local lawyer barged into his room. It was afternoon, after lunch. So they said something very serious, a dispute involving land, etc., and your Honor's orders are immediately required to prevent breach of peace, etc. So Mr. Bhupender Singh Sarao gave him a patient hearing and then said, "Gentlemen, I appreciate that there is a problem, but I do not apply my judicial mind in the afternoon." So this, the people, they're totally, surprised. Say, "Please come tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. I'll deal with your matter." So with a lot of unhappiness, the whole lot came out. Then I asked him, after my work was over, "Sir, may I ask you a question?" He said, "Yes, bolo." So what do you do that? Suppose there was a major problem. You see, then he applied. He's told me certain things which are really something I always remembered. He said, number one, this gentleman happened to be the younger brother of a powerful MLA. number one. Now, second, he has come after giving assurance to the people that I'll go to the commissioner's office and I'll obtain an ex parte order. Therefore, he could organize such a crowd. Third, that since this involves land, it is necessary that you should hear the other party. You cannot give, for the sake of justice, an ex parte order. Third is that your mind is not fresh in the afternoon. You had your lunch, I had my siesta. This is not the time to look into complex matters. I will apply my administrative mind now to deal with the cases that you have brought before me. Tomorrow morning, I am sure by the time the other party would come to know that they would go to the court, and then the other party would also be present, and I'll take whatever action deemed fit and proper. Now, what it shows that a civil servant's mind, administrative mind, need not be a very simple mind. You see, in life, simple living is fine, but simple thinking is not. Simple thinking is not helpful. You see, so it is not that the mind of a civil servant should be calculating. It should be calculated. He cannot be a sada-sida type of people. If you are a sada-sida, very soon the crowd, the Aam Aadmi, will say that a bichara officer ban gaya, kaam kar raha hai, that you don't like to be a bichara. You don't like to be called Mr. Bichara. Nobody would like to. So therefore, a civil servant's mind need not be crooked, but it has to be calculated. The word calculated has a definite meaning. That means you think of the alternatives. You think of the possibilities. Now this anticipation, the capacity to anticipate certain possibilities. As for instance, Mr. Sarao's deduction that he is related to MLA, therefore he had the guts to sort of budge into my room. He thought that he had the backup of his brother, who was a powerful MLA. So these are the extraneous conditions which have to be taken into account, and you have to have the capacity to anticipate it. The possible motives. This is very important, possible motives. Only when you have that kind of a picture, you are in a position to apply your mind to choose from various options what is a correct option. In this particular case, the commissioner applied his administrative mind and settled the matter. It was fair, it was just, and this was exactly what the rule book suggests that you should do. So this is basically the approach to dealing with questions and answers. I'll now ask you, I make a request that apart from the English dictionary, I suggest you buy 2 books, which will help you immensely in improving your language skills. English is widely known, understood, etc., but it is not a strong point. I once took a delegation abroad, and there was an Indian, of course. When introduced to a foreign dignitary, he asked him, "Your good name, please?" The dignitary was foxed. He said, "Well, I have a name." "What do you mean by good name?" "Aapka shubh naam." Now, therefore, it is always not too late to improve your English. Therefore, I take the liberty of suggesting that you buy this book, A Practical English Grammar by A.J. Thompson and A.V. Martinet. It's an English language book society publication. Second book is same ELBS, A Guide to English Style, a short guide to English style by Alan Warren. Practical English Grammar by Thompson and Martinet, a short guide to English style by Warner. These 2 books, if you read, these are meant for non-English speaking people of Europe and rest of the world. it will certainly help you in answering your questions. Because marks are awarded not because of the correctness of your approach, but also the way you put it across. Therefore, I suggested you have a look, and if you have time, please go through the Economist of London, the weekly magazine, considered the best in the world. The portion relating to India, very often you must be reading, some of you. How many of you are reading? Any of you? No. And one thing, the best way to learn English is to read English written by Englishmen. The New Statesman magazine of London and the Economist of London. And of course, if you have access to any of these other newspapers like the Financial Times, etc., would be of great help. This will create a certain amount of awareness about the world, plus a practical approach to writing answers. So this completes this part of the proceedings. I will request Saurabh now to present you the questions. You all are? You see, one point, when you listen to the question, you have the question paper, underline the important portions. What are the action points? That should be done. Yeah, please. This question, let me just, okay. One point I must emphasize. You see, there are certain things you must note when you go through it. First, appreciation of facts, carefully done. Second is appreciation of law and the policy. Third point is application of your administrative mind, influenced by the idea of justice, governed by the idea of justice and equity and fair play, and keeping in view your duty under the statute to perform, exercising your own judgment. In other words, application of mind. So appreciation of facts, appreciation of policy, and application of mind. Okay, please come up with some answers to the strategies. How do you begin, please? Yes, but underline the whole thing. You are a sarpanch. What is the position of a sarpanch under the Panchayati Raj Act? What are the duties of the sarpanch? Okay, any other? That's fine. But how do you deal with this problem? You see, a sarpanch is a public official. He is elected under the Panchayati Act. That's important. He has some legal responsibilities. Okay. Second, the school involved is a government school, funded by the government. Okay. These two are material facts. And the headmaster is an employee of the government, presumably. A civil servant, therefore, according to the definition. And he appointed a cook who happened to be a Dalit. Now the response of the non-Dalits is hostile. This is the situation. Now, how do you deal with it as a sarpanch? Mind you, you are a sarpanch. Think of the panchayat in which there is representation for women also. Women's reservation is assured. It is a body, democratic body. It is an unit of local self-government. Okay? Think of 73rd Amendment to the Constitution. You have certain public duties to discharge as sarpanch. What will you do? Yes, this is one good way. This matter is a public issue. It is a matter of public interest. Therefore, he calls the meeting of the panchayat. Yes. Now, the third point here is that attendance in the school has already fallen sharply. There's a threat of closure of the school, which is against public interest. Okay. Now, what are the feasible strategies? So please outline these strategies. That is your approach. Applying your administrative mind. Right, so you'll invite the guardians also of all, those who did not send their children to. But what will be your main point? I- Okay, I mentioned about appreciation of facts and appreciation of law. Keeping that in view, isn't it a case of practice of untouchability? What is the legal position? Hmm? Above the law means what? Nobody is above the law. Aware, sorry, I beg your pardon. Aware of law. Okay, fine. Now, who are the stakeholders? The point you raised. Now, first you list the stakeholders and the possible approach to change the mindset of the people who are no longer sending their children. How will you do that? One is law, a carrot and stick policy. You are actionable under the Untouchability Act, Abolition of Untouchability Act. If you just check your database, you will see that there is a definition of practice of untouchability. This comes within the definition of practice. Therefore, the guardians of these children have already violated the law of the land. They are liable for action under this act. But they could still be persuaded that we will not go to that extent. Sarpanch might say, he might file a case in the local police station straight away and create further problem. But he would say that that might mean disruption of the school, which is not in the public interest. Therefore, before he takes this kind of an action, an extreme action, legal action, he should make it very clear to the community that this is a matter of national importance. Nation is committed to abolition of the practice of untouchability. Therefore, there is no moral ground, no ethical ground, no other grounds. Therefore, you should fall in line. Which means this is where your sophistry, your sophist philosophy comes as an educator. And how do you play that role of a sophist? You can hold a meeting of the women folk, Mahila Mandal, self-help groups, other agencies are there. In other words, the challenge is to create a climate of opinion opposed to discrimination. You have to educate, create a social will not to do this kind of thing. Okay? So, what should be the responsibilities of the different social segments? The women's groups, the panchayats, the political parties, the other social groups. There are certain activities in which all groups take place. Those organizations are really the agencies, you can say. The non-governmental organizations could play an important role. Say a football team in which people from all communities take part. Like that. Any cultural activity. So, how to mobilize the social forces to create a will opposed to this particular practice is the challenge. What role could Panchayat play under the Panchayati Raj Act? The whole purpose of this question is to see whether you are familiar with 73rd Amendment, the spirit of the Panchayati Raj Act, and the role of the Sarpanch in a particular village in local self-government. and also the role of other stakeholders and various NGOs, social action groups in a particular area. How to deal with this particular problem. So what responsibility will you assign to these groups is important. And what are these groups? See, Panchayat is a legal constitutional body. Okay? It has an important role. What role should Panchayat play? Whole purpose of 73rd Amendment is to give them constitutional status. Can they take up this responsibility? It is a part of their responsibility. It is a governance issue. Yes. So what is your consensus? Can you put it down in writing? Just attempt briefly to answer part 1, feasible strategies 1, 2, 3, and then what should be the responsibilities of different social segments? B. And just tell me what it's about, then you go on to the next question. Bear in mind that you are the Sarpanch. That's the important point. Okay, can we discuss now? One of you should say. Tell me what have you written, what is your considered view? Good. Good. You agree with him? Right. So you break it up into 3 segments. One, the critical role of the Sarpanch. He has to deal with this matter as a part of his duties under the Panchayati Raj Act. He has to make use of the institution of the Panchayat, which is a constitutional, legal kind of a body, to deal with this matter. And those who did not agree with the decision of some high caste families, they become really the agents of change. They have a role in convincing others that what you are doing is not right. Okay? Fourth is the role of the informal organizations, women's groups, self-help groups, etc., etc. Together, the strategy is to generate a social will rather than taking up coercive measures immediately, which might vitiate the environment. So this is a rational way, a practical way to deal with it, which is also ethical in the sense it takes care of the sensitivities, but keeping in mind the utmost need to change the mindset of the people. So here you apply your judicial mind also. You apply your administrative mind and the principles of ethics that you have learned in part A of the course. Okay? Fine. Any question? See, yeah, a mixture of threat, telling them that you already committed an offense. You're actionable under the law. However, I'm not doing it because I feel that as the serpent, that you still have capacity to reform, change your views. I'm trying to change your minds, to remove your prejudices. The prejudice doesn't die quickly. It takes a long time. So this is a process of social education. The community spirit does not permit this kind of an attitude. Okay? Yes, quite right. But when you frame it in a logical sequence, giving importance to the role of the legal and constitutional role, of the Sarpanch. It is a test of his leadership capacity. Yes, you're saying something? Hmm? Yes. Yes, of course. There's a part of the what is called social awakening aspect, extension, whatever you call it. Providing, you see, if you give them bicycles, they can avoid taking meal at the school, go back to home and eat there and come back. That will perpetuate the problem. If you give to everybody, that is quite possible. घर में जाके खाना खा के आ जाऊंगा 10 मिनट. So this whole midday meal program will be scrapped. Yes. Yeah. But the question is not about midday meal program. See, if you look at the facts, it is not about the feasibility of or non-feasibility, unfeasibility of this midday meal program. It is about the prejudice of the upper caste people. This is the main subject. It's not that. So you should not dilute the main thrust of the question. Therefore, what I mentioned earlier, the appreciation of facts is important. In law, there is a term called facts in issue. What are the facts in issue in this particular case? It is the refusal of the parents of high caste families, parents of high caste children, to allow their children to eat food cooked by Dalit. That is the substantive issue. We should not deviate from that. Move on to the second question, Saurabh. Is that okay? Any other question? Of course. Sure. At the same time, you must understand the background of this Panchayat Act. What is the reason for according constitutional status to the panchayats? Precisely to raise their powers, to raise their status, to enable them to function properly and take up some of the functions which would have been ordinarily taken up by the government. So, what is the idea of local self government if you can't resolve these issues? You see, panchayats were created after independence under state Panchayati Raj Acts, which did not prove to be effective. Therefore, 73rd Amendment was made to give them a greater role. This is part of what is called deepening of democracy in this country. And the idea of local self-government is based on the fact that local leadership must be created capable of dealing with local problems. Therefore, there's a scheme for devolution of funds to the panchayats. They have to take up not merely midday meal program, but so many other development programs. So, Sarpanch is in a position to change the mindsets of the people. That is one of his major responsibilities. So, yeah, social segments. Now, think of the social segments of a village. There are informal groups. All these groups have to be motivated to go by the spirit of the law and the constitution on this particular issue of untouchability. It is their duty. Okay? And remember the fundamental principle of Aristotle's ethics. Those who exercise power are expected to be rather different from the rest of the citizens and endowed with certain merits connected with his station or official position. So, A sarpanch has to be a leader, not just a political leader, but a social leader. And this social leadership role requires capacity to reach people and change their mindsets. Failing which, he has no option but to report this matter to the police for initiating action. Okay? Second question. Interesting question, isn't it? You have to apply your administrative mind with empathy. It's a test of how you fix your priorities. You see, first thing, every disaster-prone state in India will have a disaster manual framed good old days with the British time. My state's flood relief manual was drafted in 1886 and still in force. The Brits are very thorough in these matters. So, therefore, these contain ordinarily all instructions how to deal with this kind of a situation. But assuming that it does not have a manual and you are on the ground, what will be your priorities? That's what we are discussing here. You see, few things you must bear in mind. Number one, resources are limited. This had happened suddenly, unforeseen, a cloud burst. Therefore, you are faced with an unforeseen situation with limited resources at your disposal. And you have got to act quickly to respond to this situation. How will you do it? What are your priorities? Means, by applying your idea of justice, What are the definitions of people in vulnerable categories? That's the point. Who are most vulnerable and therefore who should be evacuated first? That's the point. The word trapped is very important here. The people who are trapped are outsiders, pilgrims, tourists. Then you have patients in hospitals. Tourists. And they're VIPs also. So what will you do? You see, there is an expression in all administrative manuals, quote and unquote, a man of ordinary prudence. So you are a person of ordinary prudence. You apply your judgment. What will be? Of course, there might be a manual which lays down. But this is a case where a person's judgment is involved. It is a bit tricky because this list includes political figures also, important political figures. Now, in the culture that we have in this country, VIP culture, they normally get presidents, regardless of their degrees of vulnerability. So this is a test of your ethics, your practical ethics. You apply whatever you have learned and then come out with your order of priorities. You see, quick thinking is also a capacity for a civil servant. You will not have time to think over it during examination. You have to quickly make up your mind and put it across. Yes, good. Now, put your own priorities. You have several categories. You see, first category is pilgrims, tourists, other locals trapped across different routes, which means that they can't get out of that. Trapped means you are caught up. You can't get out of it. Communication links having been already disrupted. Then you have patients, women and children, hiker, tourists, and of course, political bigwigs. And then prisoners in jails. You see, let me just share with you the dilemma of an administration. In 1962, when the Chinese were knocking at the gates of Tejpur in Assam, the government decided to release the prisoners. But the prisoners were not willing to go. They were saying that we are quite comfortable here. They wanted a guarantee that if peace is restored, they won't be again hauled up and brought back to the jail. He said, why should you go temporarily? We live here. So some prisoners took the advantage, went out, only to be hauled back 2 days later, because ceasefire was declared within 2 days. But the wise prisoners decided to remain inside the Tejpur jail. Later, when I met some of them, they said that we took a calculated decision knowing that this war would not continue for a long time. What is the use of going out unnecessarily? It's better to hang on here as government guests. So you have to take into account the practical, situation on the ground. I give a hint. In Tejpur, in those days, there was a mental asylum, asylum for mentally patient. They are given highest priority. They have to be first escorted and protected because they are not in a position to help themselves. So, if you apply your mind, you will definitely come out with your own order of priority. It need not be the same. It is your own judgment, mind you. That's what is tested. What is your judgment? How about pilgrims who have come from all over the country? See, so just put down your thoughts. Now, additional chief secretary of a neighboring state. This is very important. He's a VIP, official VIP. Okay. Now, what would be your approach to him in the order of priority? Good. So, in this way, would you please note down? Just briefly note down your priorities, okay? Giving justification. Ready? Okay. Please come out with your priorities, any of you. Okay. Will you be able to explain adequately to your satisfaction the degree of vulnerability? Mhm. Okay. Any other thoughts? Okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay. Good. Looks quite logical. You see, the moment a person is convicted and put behind the bar, is he comes under jail manual, which lays down do's and don'ts for him. He comes under the control of the jail superintendent. See? So if he is to put to some other work, it has to be within the framework of that particular manual. This could be treated as a part of his rigorous imprisonment. Not so rigorous, but it's a part of his duties. Yes, it's perfectly possible. But you have to give reasons for each category. each category's placement in the order of priorities. That's the point. You are free to have your own opinion. But remember, there are some ethical issues involved here. What are these ethical issues? You have to bear in mind. Okay, this is very important. There is an ethical aspect of this matter. So, that is the basis of your vulnerabilities criteria. Okay? Any other thought? So, whatever he said is broadly acceptable to everybody? Then would you please put it down and pass it on to him later? We could have a look. But I suggest to all of you try, put down your answers with due justifications. Okay. That will help us to assess how you applied your mind to this particular problem. You see, what if they escape? Some of them take advantage of this situation. You see, prisoners don't become angels because of natural calamities. They remain what they were. And they have to undergo the period of imprisonment as per the verdict of the court. You have no authority to release them like that. So therefore, one has to be a little careful. You can think of transferring them to another jail, but not freeing them, which is outside your authority. You cannot do it. Yes, even if you use them, it should be as per the jail manual. See, a prisoner is in the custody of the government. Government is responsible for him. He has to serve his term of imprisonment. In fact, we have similar situations that I found while visiting some of the jails, that some prisoners are reluctant to go out. They're quite happy, you see. Especially those long-term convicts. They're very happy, some of them. But some who are willing to go out also quickly to do some more mischief. Because in our country, we don't have a system of what you call correctional homes and that type of thing organized properly. So what I'm saying is that you take it as an ethical issue. You have to define vulnerability and place your criteria, priorities, and give justifications. And that's all. Okay? Should we move on to third question? Yes, please, come. Yeah. Why did you come? Yeah, come forward. You feel comfortable? Okay, please. Then speak a little loudly so that we could hear you. Okay, yes. You see, remember, judgment is yours. It is not a mathematical question that 2 plus 2 will be 4. No. But every judgment has to be backed up by good reason. That's important. And the reason should be recorded in writing. Therefore, the primary quality of a civil servant is articulation in writing. This is a test of your skill to give what is called speaking orders. Why speaking orders are important? Therefore, English language is important. Because speaking orders are put down in writing. The first thing that I learned when joined service is that when you write, be careful because others will read it. So you have to be very careful. Second, whatever order you passed is likely to be challenged. Or somebody might not be happy with your orders and seek a reversal of your order, a review of your order. Therefore, ability to write in a cogent, logical manner the reasons for your decision is a very important quality. And this is a test for that primarily. Keep that in mind. Give your reasons and do not exceed the word limit of 200. That requires language skills. Hence I asked you to go through these books, which might help you to improve it considerably. Okay? Third question. See, one thing, speak little loudly, clearly, and with some pause so that we could absorb. Good. Now this is the test of your rationality. No? Whether you are a rational person, a man of ordinary prudence, whether you have the right kind of understanding of ethics, the concept of welfare of the people, and you help the disadvantaged. Several issues are involved here. Now, first, you identify the facts in issue. And then, appreciation of law and procedure. Remember one thing here, I'm slightly digressing, but it's important. Strict adherence to the procedure established by law, quote and unquote, is an essential part of the duty and value system of a civil servant. Why? Because 1950 judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of A.K. Gopalan versus State of Madras ruled that no person can be deprived of his life and liberty without the due process of law. So procedure is very important. The violation of the procedure is violation of the procedural rights of the citizens. And action of any officer, any civil servant can be struck down by the higher authorities on this particular ground only, regardless of the merits of the decision taken. So you must imagine the officer in charge implementing the social service has a public duty to perform. And this duty has to be performed in accordance with the policy. Now mind you, all policies have the force of law. Once a policy, say agricultural policy or education policy, is laid on the table of the House, Parliament, it acquires the force of law. This is very important. So whatever is the policy of the government has the force of law. You have to implement this decision in a fair, just, transparent manner, right? So first question will be, what are the ethical issues involved here? And what are the administrative issues? You have to appreciate the facts, law and the policy, and give your considered, reasoned judgment, decision. सौरभ थोड़ा चाय हो सकता है You see, here you have to imagine a situation. You have to position yourself as the officer in charge. Responsible for implementing a social service scheme, which means providing help to the destitute women. Okay? Now imagine there has to be a process which has to be gone into. Okay? There is a process, there is a procedure. It is not that somebody had put some money in your pocket and you have to distribute to anybody. No. There are always certain processes. These processes have the sanctity. Please remember. Which is a part of the process. There must have been instructions about how you go about implementing the schemes. These are the facts which you should imagine immediately and then position yourself. Ready? You made up your mind? Okay. Yes, tell me. Can you be a little clear? But is she the only one who has applied? Is she the only case? Okay. What do you mean by other cases? Are there eligible cases? How do you apply the criteria of justice and fairness in this particular case? See, just think of the possibility. You having received this particular policy direction from the government, you must have initiated a process of inviting applications or whatever. That process has been already initiated, okay? Surely some people have responded. And at that point of time, this particular lady appears. So it is a question of your deciding on the basis of, as in the last case, degree of vulnerabilities faced by the applicants. It's a question of deciding on the basis of merit. And merit in this case is degree of vulnerabilities, helplessness. And there is a process already, assuming, of judging, assessing the degree of vulnerability. You see, administration is a formal process. Please remember, it is a documented formal process because your decision can be questioned. Somebody might accuse you of indulging in what is called favoritism or showing undue favor, not applying your mind, limitation of fund. You don't have crores of rupees in your pocket. And then everything that you do, every pie that you spend is subjected to audit and scrutiny. That should be, all this must be borne in mind. So the mind of a civil servant, the administrative mind, has to be a little calculated. You have to anticipate the possible, reactions of your action and take a decision which is transparent, fair and just and cannot be questioned, at least to the best of your understanding. There is always an appeal against every order, but still you should be satisfied that ethically and procedurally I have been right in taking the decision. It's an important administrative decision, and also it is a case of delivery of administrative justice. It's not a simple matter of giving something to somebody. No. All the principles are involved here. Bear this in mind and tell me what is your decision. Can you speak a little loudly? But that you have done already. You see, your inquiries. You see, you are going out of the way. Please limit yourself to the context. You see, one thing, this is not only a particular case, it's a part of a system. The government had decided to provide some support to old and destitute women of your locality. So, it is not the only case that you are deciding. There may be persons who are in a similar situation, already applied with full documents. Yes. Yes, but there is a clue here itself which gives answer to your dilemma. You see, the word inquiry is a formal process. This particular word was introduced in Indian administration by Warren Hastings. He would send a letter, order, inquire and report to the collectors. So the word inquiry in Indian administrative parlance has a different meaning. That means you yourself have taken up the responsibility of causing an inquiry. And then your inquiries show that she is really destitute. Now that has to be put down in writing. Then it becomes a document. You get my point? That's very important. This is a document. And on that basis, you are free to distribute. Give her whatever is there. But mind you, it has to be transparent, just and fair. And you must show due concern to other applicants also. This should not be an isolated case in which you seem to be going out of the way. What if this person happened to be related to an important MLA? The other applicants would say that the learned so-and-so officer has gone out of the way precisely because of this reason, and an anonymous petition will be sent against you to the collector. That while distributing this, he has shown partiality. How will you defend your position? In other words, please remember, whatever decision you take is subject to scrutiny by others. And the DM might say that it appears that the officer has not applied his mind. This is an extremely damaging kind of a report. Lack of application of mind. Which means lack of application of the administrative mind. Why should you give scope for that? So therefore, this case has to be taken up as a part of your implementation of this program. And a special case can be made out. Other things being equal, she might be given a preference. You might waive this condition of documentation, having taken up the responsibility yourself. You put down. But it is basically a test of your understanding of being impartial. Absolutely impartial, treating all in similar situation in the same manner. Okay? Any other view? Yeah. Okay, please. So, agreed? So please write down. Give your answers to next question, should we? This matter relates to corporate governance. Okay, so you should bear in mind the principles of good governance in the corporate sector. That should help you to answer it. Okay, it's not a standard civil service related issue. It has larger dimensions. First question is identify the issues involved in the case. So this means appreciation of facts and appreciation of issues, which we call in legal term facts in issue. Please note the last sentence, that the residents decided to approach the courts as their appeal to the government was rejected. So you have to begin from that point of view. That point, that Any thought? Okay. You should carefully go through it first and second and underline the important facts. Please note one point. There is no specific point about environmental degradation. It is not specific to air, to water, or land. There is no specific. The word chaos is used. Then migration of aliens. The choice of this word alien is unfortunate. Alien means foreigners. Here, it will probably mean migration of people from other parts. Okay. Then third is that cost of living might go up. You get only a negative side, The positives are not mentioned. So this points to a communication gap. Yes, you might interpret liberally that the chaos means also environmental degradation. Yes, you are free to interpret. And therefore, CSR, you must know the background of CSR. Now it is a part of the Companies Act. And what are the components of the CSR? You see, interestingly, if you look at this provision in the schedule, poverty alleviation is an important aspect. But I'm not aware of any CSR of a significant nature trying to address this poverty or the farmers' distress, which is now a major issue in this country. There are softer options like opening a hospital, school, etc., which many of the corporates are willing to go for. So it requires, the question assumes that you are familiar with this whole concept of CSR and the legal provisions, and you are capable of answering the question, applying this concept, which is now embedded in the corporate governance. Okay. So what are the issues involved here? Hmm? Yes, but it is also mentioned here that they are apprehensive of a certain disturbance in the social and economic order. This is a broad kind of a statement. You see, industrialization always disrupts a rural environment. This is what is called a process of creative destruction. The old order changes, yielding place to the new. So, there is a communication gap. The government is convinced that this is a bona fide decision, the object of which is to develop an underdeveloped area. But the people, stakeholders, they don't think so. They have apprehensions. Okay? Now the government had rejected the petition. Surely there must be some grounds. Now you are here to assess whether the company could step in and remove this misunderstanding, allay their apprehensions. How? So you have to identify the issues and what can be suggested to satisfy company's goal and to address the residents' concerns. Now you have to identify the concerns first and then see how they could be addressed. Okay? After identifying the issues, you identify the matters of concern for the villagers. And then you address it. Okay? Yeah, these counter arguments must be spelled out. Each of these. There will be no chaos, rather, it will be better organized. Second, cost of living will go up, but the incomes also will go up as a result of employment opportunities. Third is that disorder, no, rather, some benefits might come through CSR initiatives, schools, hospitals, better roads, etc. And if the people want something more, which could be covered within the CSR, the company should be willing to do that. So the point is that you have to identify the issues. And then what can be suggested to satisfy the company's goal, that is harmonizing the interests of the community and also the interests of development and the company. Third issue connected with is that you have to suggest what are the measures the company should take to allay the apprehensions of the people and make them stakeholders, partners, rather than as outsiders, Make them stakeholders of the development process. That's the idea. They might buy land. Good. Okay, what you are saying is a participatory approach. Okay? And mind you, if this is a firm designed to use energy efficient technology, it might not create many jobs for the local people because they might not have the necessary qualifications. And they have a process of recruiting the best people for those jobs in a factory. But their concerns are primarily, as we have listed, 1, 2, 3. So therefore, a participatory CSR project which addresses the concerns of the villagers will meet the ends of justice so that they become partners rather than being onlookers. Okay? And the word chaos could be interpreted to mean a certain degradation of environment. Right? So this is a good, sensible approach. Any other thought? Yeah. Okay, if there is consensus on it, then I'll move on to tell you how you should address the case studies in general. I'll tell you the approach of Dr. Godbole. Madhav Godbole was distinguished member of the IAS, even Home Secretary. He had certain commandments, which I'll tell you later. 10 commandments which a civil servant must follow in his career, founded on our ideas of the modern state and our constitutionalism. So let me just complete the process of growth of our state, the Indian state, which is not very clear to most citizens of this country. I found it often. You see, A modern state, a representative government, is one based on two principles. That is, those who pay taxes have the inalienable right to decide how tax proceeds are used by the government. Monarch, the kings were earlier having the whole authority. So right from the Magna Carta signed 800 years ago till date, the process has been to make the people stakeholders. Now today, every citizen is a taxpayer. If you buy matches, a pack of matches, you pay excise duties. So this idea is revolutionary. The second idea is that only a representative of the people, a group representing the taxpayers, should decide how laws are made and how taxes are levied. The relationship between laws and taxes is integral. You know the finance bill? Every tax can be levied only with the act of the legislature. Okay? The third principle is the rule of law. The rule of law is not very well appreciated in developing countries. It means nobody should be above the law, but nobody should be below the law also. This is not highlighted. It is as much necessary to ensure that nobody is above the law. It is also necessary to ensure that nobody is below the law. I don't have to explain to you what I mean about it. Third point is that respect for rights embodied in a Charter of Rights, fundamental rights. Also faith in human rights over and above what you call fundamental rights in the Constitution. Respect for the procedure established by law. I have been telling you repeatedly is because this aspect is always questioned, raised in your UPSC papers. Your understanding of the importance of observance of procedure and the fact that the laws are made by the judges also, your understanding must be very clear. If you look at from this perspective, the idea of a modern state of India really began from what is called the Regulating Act of 1773, when the administration of British-held territories of India was made accountable to the British Parliament. Though it was a foreign parliament, but it was a parliament all the same. The East India Company had to submit annual reports to the parliament for the scrutiny of the members, and they came heavily on the East India Company. Warren Hastings was impeached. Lord Clive was tried. So therefore, there was the element of justice founded on the European Enlightenment, the ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity of the French Revolution, and the equality of man and the equality before law. These are embedded gradually, and if you see over the years from 1772 right up to 1935 Government of India Act, various legislations allowed participation of Indians, though of course in a limited manner, in lawmaking and in governance of the country. The process was completed in 1947 when we were granted independence. But strictly from the legal point of view, we were granted dominion status. A fact that has been highlighted in a wonderful book, The Indian Summer, by a German lady. What we got in 1947 was dominion status. Because Lord Mountbatten continued to be the Governor General. We became, in 1950, a republic. Okay? From 1950, if you look at till date, our constitution, which embodies the spirit of the European Enlightenment and the British constitutionalism, created a set of values. These values are embedded in the structure of the civil service. Therefore, while dealing with any question, you may like to bear in mind, is my suggestion, Dr. Godbole's commandments, what a civil servant should do while dealing with any particular case. The first is uphold the rule of law. First point, which means no discrimination. Nobody should be above the law, nobody should be below the law also. Second, promote open and transparent governance. Promote open and transparent governance. Third, observe political neutrality. Next, provide good governance. Strengthen human rights. Next, promote secularism. Now, this word secularism must be understood in the context of rule of law. Secularism is founded on rule of law. If you believe in rule of law, you cannot have anything other than secularism. This point is not very much appreciated in many countries of the world, that you cannot have democracy without secularism. Take Pakistan. Have any of you seen the Pakistan constitution? It makes fascinating reading. It begins with a sentence, whereas sovereignty rests with Allah. Now it's very important. Sovereignty rests with Allah and not with the people. I once met a Pakistani army general and asked him about this. He said, you see, this is very convenient for the army. We are answerable to the Allah. Allah is sovereign. Who is the prime minister? You see? Now you see, it's a world of difference. Second, that rule of law requires a system of delivery of justice in accordance with the procedure established by law, which should apply equally to every citizen of the country. Now in Pakistan, you have the Sharia court side by side with the Supreme Court. And Supreme Court has no jurisdiction over the Sharia court. So if you have a parallel system of justice, you cannot be said to follow the rule of law. Rule of law requires one law for everybody. Third thing in Pakistan is what is called blasphemy laws. You know what it is? I need not explain. But the important part of the blasphemy law is that whereas it is perfectly within the rights of a believer to insult the faiths of the non-believer, it is not open to an unbeliever to cast any aspersions on the faith of the believer. So this is an unequal law. It gives extra rights, position to one particular group. So therefore, rule of law cannot be said to exist in Pakistan. The periodicity of elections, is not the only criteria of democracy. Primary criteria is rule of law and the institutions of governance founded on rule of law. The other point is isolation of army from administration. This is a very important part of a modern state. That armed forces should be under civilian control. Okay? But look at Pakistan. Army chief sits over a tribunal that has decided the case of Kulbhushan Yadav. Now, you have three courts, and this was set up only in 2014. The army chief had been given the power of a judge. Now, the same person who is the prosecutor, he can't be a judge. So therefore, this is violative of the concept of separation of powers, which is a basic feature of our constitution. Now, when you talk of the separation of powers, one has to understand the principle behind it. The main principle is the European experience, what is called the experience of the European Enlightenment. And that is very simple. Nobody should be trusted with too much power. No institution should be allowed to have overriding powers in any system. That is opposed to the liberty of the citizens. Therefore, this doctrine of separation of powers means that legislature, executive and judiciary should play the game according to the rules, and not one wing should have overriding power over other two wings. Therefore, independent judiciary and, more importantly, a neutral, apolitical civil service is integral to a parliamentary form of government. That's the reason why a MLA is not made the district magistrate, because there is a conflict of interest. It will be of interest for you to go through the ongoing case in the Delhi High Court on Delhi administration's decision to appoint some parliamentary secretaries. There's a conflict of interest. Now, this conflict of interest is at the core of the British constitutionalism and the system of governance, where the lines have been drawn for each wing for discharging their duties. Okay? So, it is not just secularism when Dr. Godbole talks about it. He has in mind absolute impartiality and no departure from the rule of law. But it doesn't mean that you should have a closed mind. But there are cases like this old woman not having any documents. You are to exercise your judgment, but it should be placed on record. The reasons for your decision must be placed on record so that you fulfill this particular criteria, open and transparent governance. Okay? Next point, he mentions neither accept nor give illegal gratification. Now, this is extremely important in the Indian context. Now, gratification is a broad. Neither accept nor give illegal gratification. Let me just tell you a story about this word gratification. You see, in 1804, after the Battle of Delhi, the administration of Delhi was passed on to Calcutta. And a group of British officers came here, the members of the civil service. Just imagine early 19th century, the young men would come out of England, might have gone to Oxford or Cambridge, imbued with the ideas of democracy, liberty, French Revolution and all. They observed the system of governance in Delhi Darbar. And they made some interesting comments I'd like to share with you. Malcolm wrote that in Delhi he found there are 5 principles expressed in Persian words which govern the operation of the system here. The first principle is khusamad, flattery. It is widely practiced. It is almost an institution. First principle is khusamad. Second principle is nazrana. Nazrana, khali haath mein ab nahi ja sakte hain. So the background is that whenever you meet a high and mighty, there has to be some nazrana. First is khusama. Flattery is the institution. It's not just an individual act of expression. Second is nazrana. Third is suparish, recommendations. ये हमारा फलाना is my cousin's cousin, this, that, इसको थोड़ा कीजिए. That is seeking out of the way favors. Suparish means recommending somebody who might not be deserving, but he deserves a special treatment because he happens to be my so and so and so and so. Suparish. Fourth was bakshish. You know what bakshish means. Fifth is very interesting, chugli. It's a Persian word which means intrigue. Now, these 5 principles apparently govern the system of administration that the British saw in India. So, this gratification in India has taken a subtle form. It could take many subtle forms. You see, therefore, Dr. Godbole has mentioned that you must not accept or give illegal gratification. Next point, uphold integrity not only of oneself but also of the entire system. This integrity of the system is very important. And that is derived from the earlier story that I have narrated to you. What is meant by institutional integrity? You go to any government office, it is written office of the subdivisional officer, office of so and so. So office is distinct from the occupant of the chair at a particular moment. Office is an institution. Individual occupant is a bird of the passage. He may come and go. So he must remember that people come to see him not because of his face or no. They come because you are occupying this chair. The moment you leave this chair, nobody will come to see you. So therefore, while discharging your duties, one must remember that you represent the institution. And the maintenance of the integrity of the institution and its reputation is the sacred responsibility of the occupant of the chair at a particular point of time. So this is what you call the entire system. System consists of several such offices. Therefore, you are a part of this integrated system. It is a duty to uphold the integrity of the system. How? By following the rule of law, by adopting the values that he has mentioned earlier. Next point is equally important. Uphold not just personal integrity, but intellectual integrity. There is a difference between these two. Personal integrity and intellectual integrity. What is intellectual integrity is, I'd like to explain to you. That is often tested in the questions. Suppose you are dealing with a case of Gaurakshak type problem. You are exposed to what is going on. Now, if you are a person of intellectual integrity, you should truthfully report the matter, take note of the matter. In legal language, take cognizance of the matter and take action. If you succumb to the pressure and downplay the whole thing, nothing much happened, there's a bit of a fracas, then your personal integrity may be fine, but you will be said to be lacking in intellectual integrity of suppressing facts. Suppression of facts could mean denial of justice to some others. You see the link here. Whatever actions you take, whatever answers you write, you must have at the back of your mind the idea of justice. Because suppression of facts here will mean denial of justice to some. So this is an important fact, important kind of directive. You can call it commandment that one must follow. Last one he wrote quite interestingly, which is unfortunately not being followed. Undertake not to bear any influence on government to promote your personal interest. हमें ट्रांसफर चाहिए, हमें वो चाहिए. Cultivate a constituency to promote your personal interest is not only unethical, it is also contrary to the core values of the civil service. So, pardon me? Undertake not to bear any influence on government to promote your personal interest. You will find in a number of model questions or even UPSC questions, there are cases where it is suggested that if you don't do it, it might harm your career. If an influential MLA asks you to do something, you do it, it might help you, he might give you. This will be a case of lack of integrity, you see, or compromising your position, which means you become basically his man. Now, this is a damaging reputation. A person concerned might attain a high position, but people would remember ये इनका आदमी है. This phenomenon is something very peculiar. You won't see it in England. In the British civil service, there is a concept of anonymity. It is neutral in the true sense. If you have time, you might go through a hilarious BBC serial drama, Yes, Minister. It was shown in 1980s. It shows the relationship between the British civil service, higher level, and the political executive. Cordial, proper, and appropriate. And there is what is called anonymity, doctrine of anonymity. See, any of you had seen Churchill's war memoirs? 6 volumes. History of the Second World War was written by Winston Churchill. See? At that time, the cabinet secretary was a remarkable person who spent 5 years during the war. See? So, at the end of his term, he was offered the post of Governor General, etc. So he asked Churchill. Churchill asked him, why didn't you go to Canada? So I have better things to do. Churchill asked, such as fishing and playing golf and reading Greek philosophy. Enough to occupy my sunset years. So he declined that post. That was the spirit of the civil service. And he had never penned down anything about what he did or what he didn't during the Second World War. He was a main actor of all important decisions that was taken. So this was the spirit of what is called political neutrality, which is a virtue, an absolute virtue. So these commandments must be borne in mind when you deal with any question where there is a dilemma. Now, in the UPSC question, the dilemmas are primarily focused on the individual's integrity, your capacity to judge and put down your decision in a clear manner, in a logical manner. That's all. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'd love to answer. Any? Okay? Fine. Then I must say goodbye to you. Before that, let me just tell you. You see, you have reached a stage of your life when you have to take a decision. And you have taken a decision. Have any of you read Shakespeare? Any? No? You read? You see, in Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, which deals with polity, the working of the political system, of Roman Empire, Julius Caesar was musing, you know, about how life is. You know. So he thought that human life follows some tides. It goes up and down. One must take advantage of the tide. Let me quote. Julius Caesar said, and I quote, "There is a tide in the affairs of men, which, taken at the flood, leads on to fortunes. Omitted, all the voyage of their life is bound in shallows and miseries. On such a full sea are we now afloat, and we must take the current when it serves, or else our ventures will fail, or lose our ventures. Or lose our ventures." Unquote. So you are in the midst of a tide in your life, and I wish you all, ladies and gentlemen, all success in your endeavors. And my email ID will be with Saurabh. You are most welcome to contact me if you feel like. I'll be too glad to help you. I wish you all the very best. Thank you.